Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Ruby Sturt, here with David Carlisle, Harper Bennett, and Claudia Reese. And I want to start today by taking you back to a very specific Tuesday afternoon. I was 16 and I had just passed my driving test. I had the little paper slip in my hand and I walked into our kitchen. My brother Sam, who was 13 at the time, was in his wheelchair having a severe respiratory episode. My mum was on the phone with the doctor, my dad was managing Sam's oxygen, and I just slid the paper slip into my pocket and went to my room.
You hid the driving slip. The biggest milestone of being 16, and you just put it away.
I put it right in my jeans pocket. Because in that moment, celebrating a milestone that Sam, who requires round-the-clock care, was never going to hit, felt like a betrayal. And that's what people mean when they use the term glass child. It was coined by Alicia Maples in a 2010 TEDx talk. The idea isn't that the child is fragile, it's that the parents are so focused on the child with high support needs that they look right through the neurotypical sibling.
Look right through them. As a parent of 2 disabled kids, hearing that definition, ouch. That hits a very defensive nerve for me. Because you're not doing it intentionally. You're doing triage.
But that triage creates the good kid trap, right? Like, Ruby, you see the oxygen tank, you see the panic, and you immediately calculate, my problems, or even my joys, cannot take up space today.
Exactly, Harper. And it's not just that Tuesday. It's every Tuesday. You become the easy one. My sister Tash is 22 now, severely autistic, and her meltdowns can dictate the entire week's schedule. So I learned early on to never need help with homework, never complain about a cancelled birthday party. But the vital thing we need to reframe here, and this took me years of therapy to understand, is that Sam and Tash aren't the reason my parents were stretched thin.
Wait, say that again? If Sam and Tash aren't the reason, what is?
The system, the systemic lack of support. If my parents had reliable, funded, in-home nursing instead of fighting the local council for 3 hours of respite care a week, they wouldn't have been looking through me. They were looking at a void of societal support. We blame the disabled sibling for taking up all the oxygen in the room, but the reality is, the room was built without enough air for everyone.
The room was built without enough air. That is exactly it. It's like my school assemblies. When I first started teaching, we'd put the special ed kids in the back because the acoustics were terrible up front. We blamed the kids for being disruptive, but the architecture of the room was fundamentally hostile to them.
So let's talk about the architecture of the future, because this is where the glass child dynamic morphs into something heavier. Ruby, there's a moment, the silent expectation moment, where you realize that you aren't just Sam and Tosh's sister. You are the retirement plan. You are the succession plan.
The succession plan, yes. For me, it hit when I was 24. My parents were updating their will, and my dad just casually said, "When we move into a smaller place, we'll make sure there's an annex for Tash, so it's an easy transition for you when the time comes." He didn't ask, it was just assumed.
Oh, the casual annex drop. As a project manager, I live in succession plans, and I can tell you, unstated assumptions are where projects die. But as a parent, I get it. It's terrifying to think of strangers caring for your kids. You want to keep it in-house.
But keeping it in-house parentifies the sibling, right? Ruby, how do you even respond to the annex comment at 24?
You freeze. I completely froze. I reverted right back to the 16-year-old hiding the driver's license. But eventually we had to have the tough talk. Because if you stay in that co-parent role, you lose the sibling bond entirely. I realized that every time I saw Sam, I was checking his feeding tube site or asking about his meds. I wasn't being his sister. I was being his case manager.
And as an OT, I see this constantly. Sibling relationships devolving into clinical checklists. You walk in and say, "Did you do your range of motion exercises?" Instead of, "Did you see that ridiculous movie last night?"
Exactly. So I had to sit my parents down and say, I love them, I will advocate for them, but I cannot be their primary physical caregiver because I want to be their sister. And establishing that boundary, even though it made my mom cry at first, actually protected my relationship with Sam and Tosh.
So, what does being a sister actually look like when you strip away the case manager role, especially when communication is non traditional? You mentioned Tosh is severely autistic. How do you find that peer to peer connection?
You find their frequency. Tash doesn't do typical conversation, but she loves mechanical repetition. You guys know I restore old typewriters, right? The clack and ding rhythm. Well, I brought an old 1950s Smith Corona to the house one day. Tash sat with me for 2 hours, just pressing the keys. We didn't exchange a single spoken word, but that shared sensory loop, the clack, the ding, the carriage return, that was our conversation.
2 hours on a 1950s Smith Corona. That is beautiful. It's like sourdough baking for me. It's tactile, it's immediate. You don't need a shared vocabulary if you have a shared rhythm.
And there's something powerful about advocacy becoming a shared language, too. When I was in college, the program I ran, Fresh Perspectives, paired disabled and non-disabled students for creative projects. The deepest bonds didn't form from the non-disabled students helping. They formed when they both got angry at the university for a broken elevator and went to the dean's office together.
Yes, shared righteous anger is a fantastic bonding tool. When my local council tried to install these aesthetic cobblestones downtown, that would have been a nightmare for Sam's wheelchair. Sam and I drafted the complaint together. He can't speak, but he operates an eye gaze device. He picked out the most aggressively polite words he could find to tell the city planner off.
As someone who works in urban infrastructure, aggressively polite from an eye gaze device is my absolute nightmare. I would immediately surrender.
They did! They changed the paving material. And in that moment, Sam wasn't my patient, and I wasn't his glass child sister. We were just two siblings causing problems for the local government. And I think that's the piece typical families don't always understand about this dynamic. Yes, there's grief, and yes, there's guilt. But growing up alongside Sam and Tash gave me a lens on the world, a demand for inclusion, that I wouldn't trade for anything.
So the goal isn't to fix the glass. It's to realize the glass gives you a completely different view of the room.
Exactly. A view that demands the room be built better in the first place. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.